to ask the good conversation to calm down, but our luncheon's been so efficient with everyone going through the line so quickly that kind of surprised us all. And out of possible fear that we'll begin losing our audience, I asked Gordon if he would mind our going ahead and getting started a little early, and he has graciously accommodated that request. This morning we talked about Thomas Nelson Community College and where it is that we've come together and the progress that we've made and how it is that our future is a bright one, working together, working with our community, and the things that we would do to be even a better college in the future. But one of my ending notes was that all of this is taking place within the context of a very exciting time in Virginia, where the Commonwealth is quickly moving into the center arena as the up-and-coming state in higher education. You know, we often forget that the work that we do is within the broader context of higher education, and that many of the issues that we mull over and debate are being repeated time and time and time again across the Commonwealth at various different locations, at different colleges and universities. To help us put some perspective on our own situation, I asked if the person best in the know could come and do that with us. So Gordon Davies is here to speak to us today about us and about higher education, and particularly higher education in Virginia. Before I introduce Gordon, though, we have another guest that's with us, Dr. Larry Wiseman, who's on my immediate right, who is the chairman of the biology department at the College of William & Mary. He's an invited guest today. He's just finished up an American Council on Education Fellowship and is continuing to work on extending that experience by working with Dr. Davies at the State Council of Higher Education, and is accompanying him today to hear what Gordon has to say and learn a little bit more about Thomas Nelson Community College. I would say that, Larry, as I recall, you have some vested interest in knowing about Thomas Nelson Community College because his daughter will be starting with us in the fall. Actually, maybe we should invite Larry to say the remarks to us today. It is with a great deal of pleasure and with some honor that we have Gordon K. Davies with us today. Dr. Davies has been director of the Council of Higher Education since 1977. Now, many of you have been in Virginia and with Thomas Nelson Community College that long, and you know that Virginia has come a long way in developing its system of higher education from that of another system in the South to now what is a preeminent leader in the nation. We have a lot to be thankful for in terms of our state leadership, in our General Assembly, in our governors, and especially in our State Council of Higher Education and the Executive Director. Dr. Davies holds 3 degrees from Yale University, a Bachelor of Arts in English, and a Master of Arts and a Doctor of Philosophy in the Philosophy of Religion. He has been with the Council of Higher Education since 1973, when he joined as an Associate Director. Prior to that, he was a faculty member at Yale and a Dean at Stockton State University, State College in New Jersey. He's held a number of other odd jobs, as I recall, including a peddler of computers at one time. And he is a veteran, having served with the United States Navy. Gordon, it's with great pleasure that I present you to the faculty and staff, Gordon K. Davies.
very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. When Bob asked if we could start a little early because we were ahead of schedule, I, of course, said yes, because I know about my own drawing power and know that you have many other interesting things to do on an afternoon. There was a candidate for governor in Virginia who had a great deal more drawing power than I have ever had, and a lot more chutzpah, who used to use a line when he started speeches where he would stand up and he would say, "My job is to talk to you. Your job is to listen to me. If you finish your job before I finish my job, would you please raise your hand?" Well, it is in the nature of the kind of business that I am in that I would never use that line because the results would probably be humiliating. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and especially a pleasure to be here at the beginning of an academic year in one of the most interesting and vibrant parts of Virginia, and one of the most interesting and vibrant of its community colleges. Thomas Nelson calls up memories to me, which have, well, they do have something to do with education, but it's that other kind of education. It's that sort of learning that one gets growing up, and mine is a remembrance of those rare occasions. I was born in New York City, and we had no car, but on a very rare occasion, my father would come up with a car, and he would drive us to Jones Beach. I don't know if anybody knows Long Island. Well, my father knew New York City in an extraordinary way, so that I could say, and it was a frequent dinner game, what's on the corner of 14th and 5th? And he would tell me the four things on the corner of 14th and 5th. But my father did not know the expressways of Long Island. And we would get on these expressways, and we would go past the exit to Jones Beach, and it'd be on the other side. And then he'd get on the other side, and we'd go past it, and somehow it would have moved to the other side of the river. And I feel that way every time I go by Thomas Nelson Community College on Route 64. I go by it, and I think, there's that beautiful college, and there's no way to get there. I had an experience like that myself then a few years ago. In fact, 12 years ago, I went to Washington to run the first of the Marine Corps marathons. The Marine Corps marathon starts at the Iwo Jima Memorial, just north of the Arlington Cemetery. And I took my children with me, and we got a motel right close, and we went down into Old Town Alexandria to find a spaghetti place. That's what you're supposed to do before you run a marathon, spaghetti. I never helped. But anyway, I got on the George Washington Parkway to come back, and there I was, driving along, and there was no exit to the Marine Corps, to the Iwo Jima Monument, and I went by it once, and I got on and came back, and I went by it again, and I had exactly the same experience. It's a little like Charlie on the MTA, if you remember that song. You never get off. And one of these days, I think Bob Templin will put in a capital outlay request for an interchange, and then you can have your access. Well, you're starting today. I'm told you've had the pleasure of a summer without any summer vacation because of the conversion to the semester system. I'm sorry for that. On the other hand, I do think that in the long run, your conversion to the semester system will help your students as they seek to make the right exchanges into senior institutions, those of them that do transfer. But I realize it's been a long, hot summer. I've been in this job now for more than 11 years, and with the council for more than 15. Having been there that long, I obviously have a fair number of thoughts about community colleges. I'm going to suppress most of them. I'm going to be brief today, no matter how long it takes. I remember a university president in Virginia who was talking to one of our money committees in the General Assembly, and he went on and on and on. And as they do in this courtly Virginia manner, a member down at the end of the committee table said, "A question, Mr. Chair?" Chair asked a question from the honorable gentleman. He said, "Sir, I'd like to ask you a question." He says, "What's that on that chain across your vest?" The president looked down and he said, "Oh, well, that's a Phi Beta Kappa key." The man continued to talk on and on and on, still further. Same man at the end of the committee table said, "Question, Mr. Chair?" Chair yields to the honorable gentleman, and the honorable gentleman said, "Sir, I have another question." He said, "Is it yours?" So we'll try to keep it short. But Bob is right about the things he said about Virginia, and I'm not going to try to rehearse or repeat what he said. I will tell you, however, that in the 11 or 15, depending on how you want to count, years that I've been involved in this kind of work, I've never approached an academic year with the kind of excitement I feel this year. And if there's a trick to how to keep this thing from ringing, if anybody wants to tell it to me, I'd be very happy to know. Sorry, maybe it's not bothering you. Okay. Okay. If it doesn't work, can you hear me? Okay. So I could conceivably just turn it off then. Is that right, man?
It's working. It's fine.
Okay, it's working. Okay. Well, maybe I'm getting too close to it. I approached this year, I personally, with a blend of optimism about the system in Virginia and a considerable sense of urgency. A sense that Virginia higher education is in very good shape, that Virginia has indeed moved into a leadership role in American higher education, but a sense that we could be better, that it's never good enough, and that complacency is our worst enemy. We have opportunities for change, opportunities for improvement, and we're in a particularly strong position in the nation, and especially within the South. Consider just a few indicators. Per capita income. We have the highest per capita income in the South. We're the only southern state that's above the national average. In fact, we have the 11th highest per capita income in the country and the 4th most rapidly increasing per capita income. Our unemployment is at record lows across the state. That masks something that at least Dick, you would know about, and that is that in another part of this state, we have unemployment that is at tragic levels. So we mustn't lose track of the fact that while the state's economy is in very good shape, we remain an economy that is troubled, and the notion that no person is an island is at least as true for Virginia higher education as it is for John Donne. But nonetheless, unemployment at record lows, relocation of industry going very well, population growth in Virginia at the rate of 500 people a day, net growth in Virginia right now. You multiply that out, and you see that there's considerable growth going on. High school graduate increases of a significant kind between now and the year 2005. Virginia and Florida are the only two states east of the Rockies that are going to experience growth that it looks like it's going to be between 25 and 75%. For us on the low end, Florida on the high end. But a substantial increase in the number of high school graduates. Distinctive on the Eastern Seaboard. An extraordinarily good governor. Gerald Davies, as you know, has just assumed the post of the chair of the National Governors Association, and he set an agenda for that group, which is an agenda very much like the agenda he has set for Virginia. An emphasis on international education, on international trade, an emphasis on the infrastructure of training and education within not only Virginia, but within all the states. He's been a very strong supporter of Virginia higher ed. A person who's not been afraid to step in and say when he thinks something is wrong, but also a person who's given us, I think, a lot of financial support and a lot of leeway. Now, I say all that, and then I want to emphasize that I am not one of the governor's appointments. I am appointed by a board, and yet I do think that Jerry Belials has done an extraordinarily good job for all of us. Franz Kafka, in one of his parables, tells about a man who comes to a door in a wall, and he wants to go through the door, but there's nobody there to give him permission to do so. So he sits by the door and he waits for the doorkeeper to come. And he sits there all his life. And as he is about to expire, the door opens and the man comes out and says to him, "The door was there all your life. The door was there only for you to come through, and now I'm going to close the door forever." An opportunity not taken. I would suggest to you that it's important for us, in this year particularly, to seize the opportunities before us, before a combined set of pressures close the door. And those pressures are pressures that we're all familiar with, pressures of the federal deficit and the need to deal with it, pressures of foreign trade imbalances and the need to deal with them, pressures of an economic slowdown within our own state, as well as within the country, but I think within our own state, that could mean that this window, door of opportunity, will be open only for a while more, and we need to make the advances we can, get them in place, so that we can move forward, even when things get tight again. We need to decide, for instance, how we're going to handle a surge in enrollments before it is upon us. Those of you who have been here, as Bob said, for 15 years with me, will remember that if you don't plan for enrollment, what happens is you spend your time paying this year for enrollment that occurred last year. And there's no new money left for anything new, no new money left for any kinds of innovations, any kinds of experiments that you might want to try to change a college, this college, or any other college. And we, at least I, could spend the rest of my professional life in Virginia chasing enrollment. I don't want to do that. We've got about 4 years before that surge begins. And what I want very badly to have happened in those 4 years is to have mapped out a plan for how we are going to handle that enrollment growth. What the role of the community colleges is in dealing with that enrollment growth, what the role of the other institutions in Virginia is, indeed whether we should start a new institution in Virginia to help handle that enrollment growth, what the role of the private colleges is, and so on. It even, in fact, my friends, is possible to say we do not wish to handle all of that enrollment growth. We wish to encourage some people to leave the state. I happen to think that would be the wrong decision because the human resources are the most valuable resources of a state. But it is possible, we are now a net importer of students, to reverse that balance and become an exporter. We've got to make a decision and not allow that to just overwhelm us so that we end up doing it in an incoherent fashion. Higher ed, I think, is in an exceptionally strong position to do this. Very few of us realize what we're part of. Virginia, in fact, I would propose to you, despite all this hoopla about universities started by Mr. Jefferson and chartered by the King and Queen, Virginia has an inferiority complex and has for decades about its system of higher education. We're not really sure we're for real. We're Virginia education. Are we really like Michigan education and California education? I would suggest to you that in fact we are. That we have the 11th largest appropriation in the United States for higher education. We have the 12th largest system enrollment in the United States for higher education. We have easily the most diverse system of colleges and universities. The way we govern them sometimes sends visitors to Virginia home shaking their heads that it works at all. But the fact of the matter is that it does work and it does create an unusual kind of richness and interest in the system. There was a lot wrong with the medieval or Renaissance, late medieval and Renaissance system of city-states in Italy. And governing a system of higher ed like this is a little like trying to coordinate the city-states of Renaissance Italy. But they spawned an incredible kind of intellectual richness because of their diversity and their autonomy. We have faculty salary averages in Virginia that have increased an average of 57% in the last 6 years. 57% in the last 6 years. We have the Higher Education Equipment Trust Fund, a self-perpetuating, debt-financed means of acquiring instructional and research equipment for our colleges and universities in the magnitude of $270 million between 1986 and 1998. Probably the most creative response to the equipment problem of American higher education put in place by any state in the Union. We have the Fund for Excellence, a competitive grant program designed to encourage, to reward people like yourselves who develop projects that are worth taking a shot at, seeing if they work. If you're going to run an educational system, you have to have failure. A dean of mine, John Perry Miller at Yale, dean of the graduate school, once remarked that the problem with American higher education was none of the experiments failed. If you're going to take risks, your experiments have to fail. The Fund for Excellence is designed, it's money, to take some risks, to try it. Again, it doesn't have many analogies in the country. We have a coherent array of affirmative action programs that reach all the way down to grade 6. It is astonishing to me sometimes to look at how this array of programs has grown from a sort of simple-minded notion that what we need to do is get more high school seniors who are black to come to college, to recognize that you can't decide to come to college when you're a high school senior if you've been doing the wrong courses ever since you were in the 8th grade. And a set of programs put together to provide financial aid, better information to parents, better information to students, all the way from middle school through college and university. We have in Virginia one of the largest interactive television networks. Right now we're working on it almost entirely with graduate engineering. But one of the largest interactive television networks in American higher education. It grew. It just sort of grew the way your kids grow when you're not watching. You know, you leave one day and you come home the next and they're 3 inches taller than they were. This thing just grew like that. We have 2,700 enrollments in engineering, in graduate engineering, over an interactive TV network. 2,700 enrollments. That's the size of a medium-sized graduate school of engineering. And it's up on satellite. And the interesting thing that happens when you go up on satellite to Reynolds Metals in Richmond from Blacksburg and Charlottesville and now Norfolk, when you go up on satellite to Reynolds Metals in Richmond, then the guy at Reynolds, Rod Hanneman, says, why can't I get this for my engineers in Arkansas? And once you're on satellite, it really doesn't matter, does it? Provided Arkansas says to us, yeah, that's okay. And we are now broadcasting through that network as far away as Iowa. Now, Thomas Nelson, it seems to me, stands squarely in the middle of an impressive array of strengths and assets, geographically, demographically, educationally. David Birch, who's a business professor at the Sloan School of Management at MIT, keeps a file on small businesses in the United States. And David told me a year or so ago that the sleeper area in Virginia was the peninsula, this area. He said, Northern Virginia, we all know about what's happening up there. He said, but the place where really interesting R&D work is being done is in fact on the peninsula, and you can see it in all sorts of small businesses that are going on there, starting. And that's where, he said to me, that's where I would put my attention, that's where I would focus if I were you. You have industry then, you have the military, you have international business. And you're really just up the road from one of the greatest ports in the world. And Cannon, I think, is just the beginning of the kind of emphasis that this governor and his predecessor, Governor Robb, placed on attracting international business to Virginia. You've got transfer programs, good articulation right now with Christopher Newport, working on better relationships with the College of William & Mary. Larry, take that home. With Old Dominion. I would hope with Norfolk State. To reach out even further than you've reached out before to minorities and others who have not yet been served by a system of higher education that pledges a place for everybody who wants and can benefit intellectually from the experience. There are people who have not been reached. It's silly to spend a lot of our time as entities of the state competing with one another, and I would urge you, your administration, Mr. President, to to work on that as a major initiative. You are, in short, a growing college in a growing region of Virginia. And I would say that in some ways, and I don't want to be oblivious to this, in some ways, the difficulties of Thomas Nelson over the last several years are in fact not a bad sign, but a good sign. When I get worried, it's when nobody's contentious, when everybody's fat and dumb and happy and not raising questions. If you're going to be serving a complex, changing, dynamic area, and you've got to be a complex, changing, and dynamic institution, there will, of course, be conflict. There also are times, obviously, to heal that conflict and move on. My sense is that you, yourselves, have done that, have made great progress in that direction. But I do not regard the conflict that has occurred as necessarily simply a bad thing. Well, in a mood that's not characteristically American, but may become more so in the post-industrial, post-hegemonic age in which we're living, we have to remember that there's no upside without a downside, no yin without a yang, no privilege without responsibility, and no free lunch. Thomas Nelson and the community college system in general, I would suggest, are called to play a special role in Virginia. And the work of your mission task force, which was chaired, obviously quite ably, by Dr. Bobby Wright, is a sound and a thoughtful document. As new centers of population and wealth develop here and throughout Virginia, we must maintain Virginia's commitment to providing access to all, especially those who do not possess the wealth. If we simply respond to new centers of wealth, new centers of commerce, and put our resources where they want the resources put, we will forget a whole segment of our population. We cannot do that. We have to find a way to respond to the Manassases and the Fairfaxes and the Woodbridges, and indeed the areas of the peninsula that are developing. We have to find a way to respond to them while recognizing our commitment to respond to all Virginians, whether they possess wealth or not. But access without proper placement is apt to be a cruel joke, and I think, again, the task force was right when it called for mandatory testing, and also right in calling for minimum competency levels for developmental courses. About 18 months ago, Chancellor Jeff Hockaday and I agreed that the VCCS would take the lead for all of Virginia higher education, since it was the entity, or the set of entities, that was on the crux of this issue, would take the lead to define what constitutes college-level degree work and how students should progress through the necessary steps in a community college or any other institution in Virginia. And don't kid yourself that there aren't other institutions in Virginia that have the problem. Any other institution in Virginia to have an academically successful access to higher education. The VCCS board will take action on a set of recommendations that were put together by a VCCS and others task force this fall, and I expect the council to take action to support the VCCS very soon thereafter. The task force is again right that standards for academic progress are needed, and that we need some form of continuous alert system to phrase is yours, in all of higher education. I mean, how can we be comfortable with attrition rates that exceed 50% nationwide? We are calling the public school dropout rates nationally scandalous, and they're not half that. How can we be comfortable with those kinds of attrition rates? And then again, if the unexamined life is not worth living, the unexamined curriculum probably is not worth teaching. Again, the task force is right. We need to decide what we want students to know and be able to do as a result of our general studies and degree programs, and then we need to determine whether or not they're meeting our objectives. We were pleased at the council to provide a Fund for Excellence grant that supplemented money from the Metropolitan Life Foundation to undertake what seemed to us to be an excellent project in assessment. Excellent not only because it involved assessment, but because it saw that assessment and faculty development were very closely tied. Colleges and universities rarely get money from legislators for faculty development. The reason is that their budgets rarely are very specific about what faculty development means, except travel money and release time. But if we can tie faculty development to assessment and say, here's what we want to do, here's what we're doing, and here's what we need to do as a result with our curriculum, with our own skills, so we can close the loop. I think we can get faculty development money from the Virginia General Assembly. I think they'll support us. But here's a secret about education. Students often experience a different curriculum than the one the faculty thinks it is teaching. I had a personal experience with that years ago with a son. His name is Benjamin. I won't hide his name to protect the innocent because he was guilty as hell. He had a little red fire engine. And we had a big hedge either side of our driveway. And one night I came home and I pulled into the driveway and I stopped short of hitting that fire engine. Almost hit it. Went in and I said, Ben, you've got to move the fire engine out. You can't leave it in the middle of the driveway or Dad's going to hit it. Okay. A couple of nights later, I pulled in again, and there it was, still in the middle of the driveway. And I went in and I asked my spouse if she would do a favor for me. I said, would you take Ben down sometime in the next couple of evenings to the local truck depot where the big vans are parking, and let him watch how the truck drivers, take care of their property and park their trucks, and maybe he'll learn. And she said sure, she'd do it, and she did. And a few nights later, I whipped into the driveway a little faster, I guess, and or my reactions were a little slower, and I hit the fire engine. And I went in, and he was watching TV, and I went up to him, and I sort of lost it, and I said, Didn't I tell you not to move your fire engine? And he, And didn't your mother take you down to the truck depot and let you see what the truck drivers do? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what have you got to say for yourself? And he said, to hell with it, let the night crew park it. Well, kind of got to have to be sure the curriculum's going to come out the way you think it's going to come out. Earlier this month, Governor Belial's appointed a commission on the University of the 21st Century. Don't let the name fool you. Community colleges are very much a part of its universe of interest. And its universe of interest, briefly, is this: demographic issues, the new centers of population and wealth to which I've referred. Curricular issues. For instance, are the disciplines going the way of dinosaurs? Does it make any sense to have disciplines as we have them now? Do the disciplines need to be redefined? Do the majors make any sense? Do the majors that we hold as sort of sacrosanct really reflect any longer the full range of human experience, or as full a range of human experience as they might reflect? Does this balkanizing of human intellect into small compartments provide a sort of narrow and incoherent education, when what we very badly need in the world is a more coherent, broader sense for the richness and variety of human experience? Should colleges and universities be organized to make teaching and language and learning more effective than they are? And if so, how should colleges and universities be reorganized? And then third, mission issues. What's the purpose of what we're doing? After all the bland and banal statements, and I do not mean to include your mission task force work in this, but after all the bland and banal statements about mission, is it possible, is it just possible, that Secretary of Education Bill Bennett is right when he says that he'd be willing to give his son the money he would otherwise spend at college to go out and invest, and that his son would be just as well off not going to college? Is that possible? And if not, why not? What difference does it make? What difference does it make to major in history if you can't use Santa Ana as a response? It'd be interesting in this college, but I think in any college, to say, justify, especially in a baccalaureate program, justify the existence of your discipline in the curriculum without reference to graduate or professional school. Why study your discipline? The Commission on the University of the 21st Century will convene its own meetings, obviously, but it will also sponsor colloquia and conferences in which the faculties of Virginia's colleges and universities, public and private, will be invited to participate. I hope that out of this will come a sense for how Virginia should shape itself and plan itself for higher education over the next 20 years. So I'm early in the 21st century, not late in the 21st century. But after all, the children who will go to college in the year 2005 got born this year. They got born this year. So it's not a long-range problem. Those are the kids whose parents now might be saving for college. As the faculty and staff of a comprehensive community college, you face some of the most interesting questions in American education. What does it really mean to serve business? How should you distinguish between giving people what they want and giving them what they need? How do you know who can benefit from higher education? How do you motivate the unmotivated, skill the unskilled, enrich the impoverished? They're pressing issues. They're issues that no one in American higher education is as well qualified or mandated to address as you are. When the history books are written, it will probably be said, I hope it will be said, that no nation at any time or in any other part of the world provided so many people with access to advanced education as the United States in the second half of this century. Largely because of your efforts and your commitment. We may only get a sentence or two in the history book, but I think it will be enough to tell those who read about us that we were, that we are, an unusually generous and idealistic people who refused to give up on anyone. That's a key part of your role. And when that sentence is written, it will be because of you. there's another way of looking at this year, next year. And I will revert to my Navy days and tell a Navy story. It was a dark and stormy night. That's how Navy stories are all supposed to start. And an aircraft carrier was steaming through the North Atlantic on its way to a rendezvous. And the radar operator picked up a radar contact. It was 15 miles out, and he tracked it for a while, and it had a steady bearing and a closing range. He reported it to the bridge. A steady bearing and a closing range means a collision, right? Eventually, if some other factor does not intervene. The admiral picked up the handset on the bridge, and he called out into the night, "Unidentified object, bearing 350 relative, range 12 miles. I have you on a steady bearing and a closing range. I suggest you change course." Back came a message. It said, "Unidentified object, bearing 170, range 10 miles. Confirmed, steady bearing, closing range. Suggest you change course." At 8 miles, the admiral did the same thing. "Unidentified object, 350, 8 miles, still on a steady bearing, closing range. Suggest you change course." Back came an answer. "Unidentified object, bearing 170, confirmed, steady bearing, closing range 6 miles. Suggest you change course." At about 2.5 miles, the admiral lost it. Big aircraft carriers take a long time to turn. And he picked up the set and he said, "Unidentified object, 350, range 2.5 miles, steady bearing, closing range. This is an aircraft carrier of the United States Navy, and I am an admiral. And I order you to change course." Very quickly came a response. Said, "Admiral on the aircraft carrier, 170, range 2 miles. Sir, you might be on an aircraft carrier, and you might be on an admiral. You might be an admiral. I'm only a petty officer, 3rd class, but I'm on a lighthouse. And I suggest you change course." I think the moral of the story is obvious. Change is coming. We can change ourselves. Sometimes it isn't graceful to do it, but it's the most expedient thing to do. And those of us who resist change will inevitably get the most of it. So it's in our interest to shape our own destiny. That's what you're doing. That's what you can do as you continue serving the people of Virginia and the people of this region. Thank you very much. I hope you have an absolutely splendid year.
Gordon, on behalf of the college faculty and staff, we'd like for you to participate in this, the 21st year of our celebration of our founding. And in the 250th year of our founding father, Thomas Nelson, we present you this with our best wishes.
So thank you very much. Thank you. Shall I open it?
Please do.
It's well wrapped and well taped. Right? Oh, thank you very much. It's a drawing of Thomas Nelson Community College of Harrison Hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again for being with us. You've helped us to get off to a marvelous start. And remember that as we approach you for that special capital outlay appropriation for the exit ramp, if we could, Gordon, we already have that. Can I work on an auditorium? Once again, thank you very much. We're off to a marvelous start and look forward to continuing this week for the opening of our 88-89 academic year. Thank you for being with us.
What are these people doing?
How you doing? How are you feeling?
What are these two people doing?
Last time I saw you in pain.
What are these two people doing?
You have a lot of sick people. Take care of yourself. I mean, you don't have a choice other than to tell you that. But still, take care of yourself. So these things are important. So take care of yourself.
My keys and your own.
Not trouble.
No. Did you get one?
No. I didn't have that much money.
Yeah. I'll help you. I got a kitty.
Oh, you got a kitty?
What's the kitty's name? Kitty name when I got him. His name was Kitty Blue.
I like that. I like that.
I thought you'd be brave when they said got his tail.
Big thing, good to take it.
Oh, he's a big one. That's nice. He was, but I don't know. Not now. And he had everything like it got all that, including things that's not so fast. I can't even look at it.
Oh,
Well, I want what, you want to give me the here later this afternoon?
Oh, I will. I say bye.
I've been here as long as you have.
Well, you see, you don't know it, and I'm not holding you for that, but starting July 1st, we went back to the General Assembly this year with a notion of what we call last dollar. And we said, we need pool money that somehow, so that after it's all said and done, and the kids got all the money the kid can get, if the kid is short, this pool buys it. And one of the things we're doing is this project that we started guidance council in each of those schools, private money, industry support. The guidance council's sole job being college government. The city of Norfolk has said, we'll pay for the SAT test. It's getting the SATs. We have said, we're not willing to pay for the prep course if the kid needs that. And if on some of this, which is better than us administering it, because that council might know things about the human dynamics of that kid's situation. Lead them to say, the kid just needs to work out. Now, catch-22. If you take the federal laws about financial need, when your program kicks in and gets $10, the federal will reduce his Pell Grant by $2. We're trying to find a way around that.
Try it out.